It's raining again tonight, up here in the mountains of Tohoku, in this old, crooked, haunted house. The storm presses against the windows like a forgotten debt. The floorboards creak nearby as if someone's just waiting right around the corner. The power flickers, and the radio hums to life like it's remembering something. Earlier, as I was making my trek up here, I saw a little boy in the mist. He had his back to me, but I could tell he was holding something. I kept my distance. And then, just before I started this, there was a knock at the door. I opened it just a crack, and there it was, a lacquer tray with tofu perfectly centered. It was still wet, as if it was just been opened. There were no footsteps in the mud, no voice in the woods, just the tofu. They say he's harmless, little tofu kozo, a little yokai that roams on misty nights with a tray in his hands. But I've never trusted anything that moves without a sound. But let's not dwell on that. Not tonight. Tonight, I want to talk about another world. One far from these mountains, but just as haunted. It's a place I first glimpsed while watching Kimetsu no Yaiba, specifically the Entertainment District arc. The spectacle, the colors, the masks, perfect for the character of Uzui Tengen, the sound Hashira. But beneath the anime sheen, there was something real, something historic, something tragic. Tonight, we're going to Yoshiwara. One thing I've always liked about Kimetsu no Yaiba is that it takes place in our world. And the first hint of this is when Tanjiro is fighting a demon in the final selection arc, and he mentions it's now the Taisho era. The demon then freaks out, not realizing how much time has passed. And later, Tanjiro goes to Asakusa, and then you see Asakusa in Taisho era Asakusa. And for those of you that don't know what Taisho means, is that Taisho is the era between Meiji and Showa. So this is before World War II. And so Kimetsu no Yaiba incorporates a lot of realism into its story. And one interesting part that I never would have expected was the Entertainment District arc. And now I had heard about this type of place, but I never really thought too much about it. And then, I watched this and it became a fascination for me. So I was watching Kimetsu no Yaiba when I really got a better glimpse into it, but it wasn't the demons and it wasn't the flashy lights, but the backdrop of the Entertainment District arc. It was stylized, sure. Anime always is. But there was something about it that felt real. Like a mask over something old and a little too quiet. But it was flashy, just as flashy as the character of Uzui Tengen, the sound Hashira. So this was the perfect arc for him. And that's when I found Yoshiwara, and I started reading more into it. So Yoshiwara came to life in 1617 during the Tokugawa shogunate. Now the idea was simple: contain vices, control the pleasure, keep the undesirable elements of society, gambling, prostitution, theater, into one walled-off part of Edo. It was originally located near Nihonbashi, but in 1657, the Great Fire Meireki burned much of Edo to the ground, and even Yoshiwara wasn't spared. So they moved it to what's now Asakusa. And the new site was called Shin Yoshiwara, or New Yoshiwara. It was basically a city within a city, surrounded by a moat, gates that locked at night. No one came in and out without approval, and especially not the women. They called it the Yukiyo, the floating world. But it didn't float, it was trapped, anchored in place by rules, debts, and illusions. Life inside Yoshiwara was structured like a machine. Every girl had a role, every gesture a meaning. Girls entered around the age of 7 and 8, sold into indenture by families desperate for money. The youngest were called kamuro, attendants to the high-ranking courtesans. At around 12 or 13, they might be promoted to shinzo, which were apprentices learning the arts of seduction, conversation, and performance. If they were beautiful, talented, and lucky, they might even become an oidan. The oidan were not just prostitutes. They were entertainers, fashion icons, cultural symbols. The top among them, called taiyu in Kyoto, could reject clients. They were schooled in classical poetry, musical instruments, tea ceremony, and conversation. They wore layer upon layer of ornate silk, towering hairpins, and 6-inch platform shoes called komageta. So if you actually watch the Kimetsu no Yaiba Entertainment District arc, the character of Daki, she was the oiran, and she wore all of this. And even her weapon of choice was the silk. But if you look at her shoes, those were those giant 6-inch platform shoes. And so you get a pretty good idea what they looked like then. So every aspect of the oidan, their appearance meant something. Even how they tied their obi. A courtesan's obi was tied in the front and not behind them. Because, and this is quite simple, it needed to be undone repeatedly throughout the night. So, pretty practical, I think. But glamour was only skin deep. Beneath the cosmetics and the composure was exhaustion. And for every oidan you saw in a parade, there were hundreds of lower-ranking girls you didn't see. Now, Yoshiwara also has its ghosts. So they say if you hear a faint jangling behind you in an alleyway near the old Yoshiwara site, don't turn around. If you hear that metal clinking like wind chimes, that's not a breeze with a wind chime. It's an oidan with too many hairpins, the one who died mid-parade, still dressed in her silks. Some say she's still looking for her client. Others say she's looking for the girl who replaced her. Now, contrary to popular belief, Yoshiwara wasn't just a red light district. It was an engine of culture. Many of the styles that we associate with Edo-era Japan, like fashion, hairstyles, perfumes, turns of phrase, whatever, originated in Yoshiwara, and it eventually spread outward. Ukiyo-e artists, made woodblock prints of courtesans that were sold like celebrity posters. Kabuki theater adapted their stories into dramas, and writers romanticized their lives to sell books. Of course, the truth was rarely as elegant as the prints, but people didn't want the truth. They wanted fantasy. And that was the real currency of Yoshiwara. And just like any place, there were famous oidan. Some names survived the years. One such was Yugiri, whose tragic beauty made her a favorite in poems and plays. Another is Katsuyama, who was as respected for her writing as her looks. And then there was Takao Nibane, or Takao II, who, legend says, refused to sleep with a powerful lord and paid for it with her life. Now, these are just the exceptions. Most women were known only by working names. When their contracts ended, if they lived that long, they either disappeared into arranged marriages, became managers of other girls, or died from disease, heartbreak, or even fire. And no, Yoshiwara did not just have one fire. It had another. It had part 2, the sequel. This one came in 1913. Yoshiwara burns again. This time, the fire ripped through the district faster than anyone could react. Dozens of women died. Many were trapped in locked rooms, hidden corridors, places where clients came and went, but no one else ever did. Some say the screams were heard all the way to the Sumida River. Others say they were muffled by the walls, by the shame, by silence. So after World War II, during the U.S. occupation, Japan passed an anti-prostitution law. Yoshiwara, legally speaking, died in 1956. But, as with many things here, the letter of the law and the spirit of enforcement didn't always match. Brothels rebranded. They became soaplands, offering non-sexual bathing services. On paper, intercourse wasn't being sold. In practice, clients and workers were just consenting adults, and the state turned a blind eye. Gotta love it. Gotta find that. When you find that loophole. So Yoshiwara lived on, quietly, beneath new signs, new names, and in some corners, it still does. So, going back to 1913, after the fire, after the years of illness, debt, quiet disappearances, the women of Yoshiwara found themselves buried in one place, Jokanji. It was nicknamed Nagekomidera, the throwaway temple, because, well, that's what happened. When a girl died with no name, no family, no money, her body was trapped and delivered here. No ceremony, no fanfare, just silence. Hundreds, well, more likely thousands, were laid to rest in a mass grave beneath a single stone marker. If you go there today, you'll see it. Modest, worn, still honored by those who remembered what it really means. The incense burns, but the wind still whispers. Another ghostly tale of this area. They say if you visit the path where the old gate once stood, you might meet a girl in a kimono. She has pale skin, a silent bow, and a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. She looks polite, harmless, but if you try to speak to her, she just vanishes. Some say she's one of the girls who never left. Or maybe she's still waiting for the one who never came. Now, the streets still exist. Well, in a modern sense. Yeah, they've been obviously repaved, sanitized. But the signs still exist, only modern. The neon signs have replaced the old wooden signs. But the girls are still there, just new girls, under new pretenses. But the shadows still remain. Yoshiwara wasn't just a district. It was a dream, both beautiful and broken. A machine that turned women into illusions. A theater where no one ever left the stage. And sometimes I wonder, maybe that little yokai I talked about earlier, the Tofu Kozo, maybe he leaves his tray for them, the forgotten girls, the ones who didn't make the prince, the ones whose names are gone. So that is Yoshiwara in a nutshell. And if you're ever in the area, if you see a girl smiling in the mist, don't smile back.